Why is 35mm the most controversial focal length? There are some people who argue that the 35mm is an essential lens that every single photographer needs. Yet, you've got other photographers who are saying, no, 35mm is a redundant bit of glass that is just going to weigh you down. And so, this got me thinking, is 35mm the best or the worst focal length? The more I thought about this, the more questions started popping up. How comes 35mm is so Marmite? How comes there are some photographers who absolutely swear by it, yet other photographers are so done with it and never want to touch one again? And could a zoom lens be the answer to all of our prayers? To find out, we have got to start with the most important element when discussing focal lengths, and that is the visual signature, which pretty much means what do the images actually look like that are produced by this focal length? Because irrelevant of the brand and the model, 35mm kind of has a look. It's just kind of flat looking. Like, you don't get any of the same sort of compression that you do with like a telephoto lens, and you'll struggle to create really dreamy portraits like you can on like an 85 or a 135mm. And you also don't get any of that reality bending kind of distortion of the world that you get with wide angle lenses if you're shooting like a 12 or a 16mm. 35mm kind of sits in this like middle grey area. It's neither wide, it's neither tight, but it's kind of wide, kind of tight. And this makes you wonder, why do some photographers spend so much money on 35mm prime lenses that just create kind of flat looking images? Because you'd think as photographers, we would want to have a great experience with every single one of our tools, because that's going to encourage us to keep going, right? Wouldn't it be better if we were just able to point our camera at things we find interesting and to immediately just be able to take incredible photos like that? That would, for a lot of photographers, be absolutely perfect, wouldn't it? And so, other than cost, why isn't every photographer rolling around with a 70-200 f2.8 just getting Instagram bangers for days? There's got to be more to it than that. And that's when it hit me like a rocket, that maybe the weaknesses of 35mm are actually its greatest strength. You see, after buying the Fuji X100V, which is a 35mm prime, non-interchangeable camera, I was hella disappointed. It looks so cool, but the images that I was creating just didn't fill me with excitement. I didn't get that buzz of, I've just taken a great photo, look at this. I was disappointed in myself. And I was going to locations that I knew looked absolutely incredible, yet I was always leaving disappointed. And I was agreeing with every single criticism of 35mm just being flat and boring. But then something changed. As the buyer's remorse was kicking in, and I had to use that camera, I started to like it. It's almost painfully obvious in hindsight, but we have to break down what our goal as photographers actually is. I'm going to assume that if you are like me, we want to be great photographers and to not have to rely on gimmicks in order for us to take cool photos. We want to be able to tell interesting stories, to capture attention, and to push it towards ideas and things we find visually interesting. And if that's your goal, 35mm may just be the focal length for you. Why is that? A lot of people are not going to like this answer. 35mm is ruthless. There is nowhere to hide. The flatness of image that the focal length creates will expose you and your skills far more than any other focal length will. If you aren't that good, 35mm will hijack your shutter button and instantly turn it into a negative self-talk button, because the images you'll create will just feel flat and boring. Because instead of using the shallow depth of field and the distorted perspectives that professional kit gives and creates that sort of like professional look, there is nothing for you to lean on. In order for you to create a good image, you're going to have to rely on contrast, on composition, on knowing how to create subject separation, being able to understand exposure differences, where to place your subject, visual weighting. You're going to be able to have to create patterns to break patterns in order to make your images interesting. AKA the fundamentals. Using 35mm will give you, as a photographer, the brutal truth that you need to hear as to how good you actually are as a photographer. And that is something that we all probably need to hear and need to feel, because we need to understand where our skill gaps are in order for us to fill them. See, if the goal is to be a better photographer, we don't want to hide behind the smoke and mirrors of professional kit. We want to be past any camera at any focal length to be able to take a cool photo. So would a zoom lens that gives us a variety of focal lengths be the greatest learning tool for us? Well, I would argue to start with, yes, because it will give you the itch for photography. However, if you want to be a serious photographer, a prime lens will teach you so much more and will translate to other focal lengths, because there is one fundamental difference that makes prime lenses an incredible tool for learning. Let's say we are taking a photo of something and we realize we are too far away, so we have to get closer somehow. On a zoom lens, we can just zoom in. However, on a prime lens, we have to move with our feet. And this is so crucial, because as we are moving, our relative distance and position to various things around us, things that may have been in our composition, now changes. And this really starts fueling our understanding of how our position as a photographer can alter an image, can alter a composition. We're able to place things where we want them. And this starts really making the world feel 3D. And this is so key for our learning as a photographer, because we start noticing how our movement and how we can alter the composition around us by where we place our camera. And by using the same prime over and over and over again, the learning effects will only compound because we are working within the same consistent parameters. Which brings us back to our question: is 35mm the worst or the best focal length? If you want to learn more about photography, I've got this playlist on this side, I think. And yeah, peace.